Ever since Animal Crossing Wild World, I have been a mega fan of the series. Besides the original game, I've played everything in the series, yes, including Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, and I even enjoyed it. I have more hours in Animal Crossing New Leaf than I do in WarioWare DIY, which says a lot if you watch my own channel. So just from all that, it's easy to assume that I was on the New Horizons bandwagon before and during its release. I loved the game, but I can also notice the flaws in accessibility it has. Luckily, it's not as crazy as Mario Kart Wii's accessibility, but there are still some issues that should be mentioned. So for the game's anniversary, that's what I'll be talking about today. Like always, I'll only be talking about the visual aspects, as that's the part of video game accessibility I struggle with. I'll also be showing rough examples of what my vision is like, similar to how I do it with the Mario Kart Wii video. It's not a perfect representation of my visual impairment, but it helps me explain what I mean. But enough intro stuff, let's get into it. For the most part, the UI is really nice. The inventory is straightforward, other menus like buying stuff at the Able Sisters are really good, and the dialogue boxes are great, sporting black text on a white or cream coloured background. Plus they managed to make it both functional and charming, which isn't always easy to achieve in gaming. I would have liked it if they at least made the white text on the black background from New Leaf an option, kinda like how modern social media sites have a light and dark mode. They could have even made it a nuke phone thing to be hip with the kids. But at least the text is readable. I'm also really glad that they didn't stick to whatever they did with Happy Home Designer's text boxes. Like, why would the game pick that colour for the text boxes and text? Plus, if the positives I mentioned are negatives for you, there's always the zoom button available in the Switch's settings. I would prefer if Nintendo had accessibility settings in their games, but this zoom feature is actually very useful and worth turning on, even if you don't have a visual impairment. Side note, I'd love to go in more depth in a separate video about the fonts in the Animal Crossing series and how accessible each game's font is. Maybe I'll tackle it later. But sorry, I went on a tangent there. Let's continue with this video. As I was saying, there was a lot of UI done right for New Horizons, but one thing it got wrong was the in-game clock. As you can see, it went the more minimalistic approach, unlike previous installments that went for more fun clock styles. The issue isn't the minimalism itself. The problem is that the white font of the clock could blend in with whatever's behind it. For example, if I stand on the beach or snowy patches of grass, the clock is pretty much hidden for me. I mean, look at this. Nintendo didn't even think to add a border or a different colour in the background of it. You'd be better off checking the time on your phone or on the Switch home menu at this rate. The frustrating part is that this doesn't just apply to the clock, it's just the most obvious one. It applies to any smaller white text that explains the controls. Like I mentioned before, this stuff could have easily been solved if they added a different colour behind it or even a border or drop shadow on the text, like what they do with some of the other UI. It's just that it was a massive oversight that should have been common sense, even beyond just making the game accessible. This next issue is a smaller one, but it's one that wasn't in the previous Animal Crossing games, and it takes place in the custom designs feature. So this feature had been around since the very first Animal Crossing, and it has only evolved since then. The first game introduced the concept, Wild World lets you place them on the ground, City Folk lets you make pro designs which let you edit each part of a shirt or dress, and New Leaf added the ability to choose a wider combination of colours, plus the ability to make a wider variety of pro designs, and hold 10 of them per character instead of the previous 8. New Horizons is no exception. The game added even more options for pro designs, plus giving us more than just 10 slots and an online database to share our creations with others worldwide. As I'm sharing these on screen, do you notice anything different about New Horizons compared to the earlier titles? Except for the first Animal Crossing. New Horizons design feature removed the zoom button. Post-editing squish here. Just here to let you know that Animal Crossing Wild World also doesn't have a zoom feature. I got that detail wrong. However, I do still stand by my statement because Wild World is the second game in the series, so it makes sense that the feature would still show up in City Folk and New Leaf, but doesn't make sense that it be taken out of New Horizons when it was in 2 previous games. Okay, back to the video. Situations like this really annoy me. I really don't like when games, or anything, removes a good or harmless feature for the hell of it. In this case, it was a useful tool and would have been especially helpful to those playing the game in handheld mode. I can understand it being absent from the first game. It would have been nice to have for those playing on a small CRT, but it gets a pass since later versions improved on it, New Horizons had no excuse since multiple other games in the series used it consistently. And sure, the Switch has that built-in zoom feature I mentioned earlier, but using that as an excuse to remove the in-game zoom feature would be like Smash Bros removing the button mapping because the Switch lets you do that too. It's just silly to remove features like this. The next issue I'd like to bring up revolves around everyone's favourite kind of clams. For those unaware, whenever you're on the beach, you might hear a little splish sound, followed by a little sparkle in the sand. If you dig up those little sparkles, you'll find Manila clams. These can be used to craft bait, which makes catching fish a little easier. Well, as a visually impaired person, I find it incredibly difficult to dig up these Manila clams, as the sparkles in the sand are very hard to see. They're not only too small and last like half a second, but the sparkles in sand are too close in colour. It's a similar visual issue to the clock blending into the sand that I mentioned earlier, except that this at least has a sound indication, though this wasn't helpful for me personally. An easy solution to this problem would have been to just have dig spots pop up, similar to how fossils and gyroids appear in the rest of your island. People may be thinking, but Squishy, Manila clams are an optional thing, you could just ignore them since they only give you bits. Well, Gulliver exists. For those who need a recap about Gulliver, he's a sailor who washes up on your beach and it's up to the player to find 5 pieces of his broken communicator. You want to guess how you find these broken parts? The shiny spots on the beach, where Manila clams are. Not only that, but you need to help Gulliver, not Gulliver, just Gulliver, 30 times in order to unlock the recipe for the golden shovel. So a golden tool that reduces the amount of in-game crafting is locked behind an accessibility issue for me. I still don't even have it unlocked because it's that hard for me, and I got the game 2 hours after it launched. Again, this could have been solved by having the stars on the ground instead of the sparkles. It's honestly disappointing that this is an issue. The next issue I'm going to mention isn't entirely Nintendo's fault, but it's still an issue that affects people and should be brought up in this video. For a lot of blind and visually impaired people, catching certain bugs and spotting smaller fish can be a huge pain. There are some bugs that blend into the surroundings a bit too well, like fleas on villagers or the various cicadas and beetles found on trees. Meanwhile, there are other bugs that hide, and players need to find them using audio cues alone, like with mole crickets. Then with the fish, the issue is simpler. The smaller fish shadows are just very tiny and hard to see for some people, especially at night when the lighting is different. The colour of the water and the shadows are quite similar at that time. Sadly, this is an issue throughout the whole series, and there's not much Nintendo can do about it. It's not like they can make the bugs neon green or the fish glow in the dark. There are at least sound cues with a lot of the bugs though, so that's helpful. This last issue comes from the paid Happy Home Paradise DLC, which was released back in 2021. I thought it would make the most sense to mention this at the end of the video since it's paid optional content that not everyone would have access to, but it is still worth noting for those who want to finish the DLC. So at the end of the main story for Happy Home Paradise, which happens after you help 30 clients, you unlock the ending of the game, which is in the form of a rave-type concert with DJ KK. You know, the version of KK Slider from Animal Crossing New Leaf that has actual clothes on instead of a guitar on his naked stomach. Well, if you unlock this unskippable rave cutscene at night, there will be flashing lights on the beaches that might not be suitable for some viewers. They will also start appearing on Sunday nights from then onward. Move to Mondays if KK Slider has a regular concert on your island on Sunday instead, like if there's a fishing tourney or something. I've been showing footage of this event during the day, just to show you what it looks like, but it's something to keep in mind and it's best to play near the end of the DLC's main story during daytime if you think this will affect you. And that's everything I can think of. These are all things that either affected me negatively or I've seen complaints about online. But it's interesting to look at without the rose-tinted glasses the game brought when it first released in 2020. Special thanks to Murmori and JVGS Jeff for providing me with extra images and videos. Thank you everyone for watching. If you'd like to see more videos about accessibility in video games or Animal Crossing, feel free to subscribe to Gaming Reinvented. You could also give your thoughts on the topic in the comments below or the Discord server linked in the description. Until next time, bye.